Thank you. Good afternoon, friends. I'd like to first of all thank Jane, the Ozan Foundation, and all of our team that have been working really hard to make this day possible. I know because of COVID restrictions, we had to do all sorts of shenanigans at the last minute to make this happen. So as the introduction mentioned, I work with Muslim communities and work around Muslim identities. And we're talking about tackling prejudice. But if you ask any person, let alone a Muslim, are you prejudiced? Most people's self-narrative, their narrative of themselves, isn't one that they have prejudice. Most people think that prejudice is over there somewhere, that they themselves are very fair people, they stand for justice, they stand for truth, and that's how most people see themselves. So why are we even talking about this? Well, we heard throughout this day the painful stories of people of LGBT plus background. We heard from Ahmed Al-Hadi the trauma that he went through and the loss of life of people around him, very close friends to him. And if it hadn't before, these stories that we've heard today should drive home to us the urgency and the desperate situation that people of LGBT background face around us. And it seems as though while, within Christianity and other religions, there's a very live debate, and maybe that's an understatement around these issues, but it feels as though within Muslim communities there's almost a denial. We haven't even got to the level of having that debate. And I'm not sure which is worse. Well, I think I know. So we Muslims, we're very proud of our tradition of justice. We're very proud of the tradition we have of standing up for the rights of the oppressed, of standing up for equality. Almost every verse of the Quran starts, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. And yet, when I reflect and I think, where does that compassion go? Where does that mercy go? Where does our sense of equality, our sense of truth, and our sense of justice go when it comes to dealing with this issue of people who are LGBT+. It's a difficult one. It's a really difficult one to answer if we are to be honest with ourselves. Because if we, as Muslims, stand up and ask for our rights, and we want equality for ourselves, and we ask the world to stand with us when we talk about prejudice and discrimination that we face, and we do, and that's a serious issue, anti-Muslim prejudice, Islamophobia, whatever you call it, around the world, in this country and in other places in the world, is a serious problem. I don't want to understate that. But what moral ground do we have? What moral backbone do we stand with if we talk about that and yet seek to deny it to somebody else, our neighbor, our friend, our colleague, the person who lives down the road? How do we make that argument? How, for a religious person, is such a frame of thinking even possible, that we want to say something for ourselves and yet we deny it for others? Surely, and is this not the golden thread that we say runs through all religions, that we treat others in the way that we would like to be treated? And Islam is no different to that. Islam has powerful traditions, profound traditions around treating others in the way that we would seek to be treated. So I'm left with this very perplexed feeling of where is this denial of this issue coming from? We hear the stories, we know of the stories, and yet this does not seem to feature in the conversations that Muslims are having around their tables at home. Definitely it's not there in the leadership of Muslim communities, at the top table, if you like, of Muslim organizations. And I've been at some of those tables, I've been in some of those rooms, and often when issues like this are raised, there are more important issues, there are more pressing issues, there are bigger concerns, this is too controversial, this is too divisive, this is not the right time. How long are we going to use those sorts of reasons, arguments, and may I say excuses? If we are not going to respond to calls to protect people's lives, if we are not going to respond to protecting the life of a person, when the Quran says that if you protect the life of a person, you've protected the whole of humanity, then how do we justify being religious? How do we justify calling ourselves followers of that message? So the urgency, I think, is really something that I want to drive home, and I want to say to my fellow Muslims that this is not an issue we can afford to ignore. This is not an issue we can afford to leave for another day, because how do we value one life over another? A life that God has created, a life that God has breathed into of his own soul. This is what we are told. وَنَفَخَ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِهِ, and he breathed into him from his soul, from his spirit. And this is what gave birth to life, to human life. A previous speaker said, this is really a pursuit of searching for who we are. And this is what I would like to ask Muslims. We need to ask ourselves, who are we? Who do we want to be today? What do we want Islam to be? What role do we want it to play in our lives? And how do we want others around us to see Islam? These are defining moments for the presence of Muslims in Britain and in other parts of the world. So some practical steps that I'd like to leave us with. Let's talk about this issue. Let's not avoid it. Let's not push it to the side. Let's not bury it under the carpet. Let's not put our heads into the sand. Let's talk about the issue, because it's an important issue. It's an issue, not something that's peripheral to our agenda, but is actually central to our agenda, because justice is central to our agenda. Let's be honest about the issue. It's not a problem that's out there somewhere. It's a problem that's in our homes. It's a problem it's an issue that touches the lives of our children, our siblings, our families, people in our communities. So let's be honest about that, and let's talk about that as something that is our issue and not their issue. Yes, people have to go on a journey. Yes, we have to learn how to talk about this. We have to have the courage to be able to talk about this, to bring these issues to our leadership, to people that may be culturally somewhat dislocated from some of these conversations. But that is the challenge of our communities. That is the challenge of our presence in a country like this, where we have the freedom to talk about these sorts of issues, where we have the opportunities to educate ourselves and bring ourselves into conversation with not just this issue, but so many other pressing concerns around us. Some people may be afraid. If I touch this issue, if I talk about these issues positively, and many do behind closed doors talk about these issues very positively, in ways that I would say are very encouraging, and yet, for some understandable reasons perhaps, don't feel that they can go out into the public and endorse these issues. My message to my friends in that position would be, have courage. Have courage, because all of us need to stand up for issues of justice and campaign against inequality. Do we not say to people that the word jihad is a very misunderstood word? We say to people that jihad is not about violence, it's about a struggle, a quintessential struggle for the right, for the truth, for justice. So what better jihad than for Muslims to focus on defending the lives of people, lives that are being ruined and put under tremendous stress and strain because of the prejudices that society has towards them. So I think this is my call to Muslims, that let us adopt this issue of standing up for, being allies to people who are LGBT+, but also welcoming and opening up conversations to LGBT+ people within our community. Let's not put them onto the periphery of our community. That's not where they belong. They belong in the center and in the heart of our community. Thank you very much indeed.